So with no further delays, let me announce Noel to the stage. Noel. Thank you, Noel.
Hello.
Thanks for joining, and thanks, for actively waiting until now to give your presentation. So, interesting one. You will be talking about monetizing open network APIs, learning from API success stories.
Mm-hmm.
So, how come?
So what we're talking about is really about that we started 2 years ago with something called network APIs for developers. So like the panel discussion before, we heard a lot about developer experience, how we can bring developers to interact with systems and to come into our customers from telcos. And this is exactly what we're doing with this. And I will give some insight there.
So Noel, over to you, and then I will join you for Q&A session. Thank you so much.
See you. Okay. So first of all, my name is Noel Wirzius. I'm working for Deutsche Telekom. I'm the product lead for network APIs. So, and what are network APIs in the end? So 2 years ago, Deutsche Telekom, we're sitting together and thinking about, okay, a lot of these 1Edge, Twilio, and Infobip doing all this CPaaS business. And we decided, okay, but telcos are not just sending out SMS and sending out voice calls. So we take a look what capabilities telcos have. And we're coming to the conclusion that we're having 3 different categories of informations. One is that we're knowing everything about our customers. So we're knowing, in the end, the gender, the address, where they're living, and nearly everything. Because if you want to get a SIM card or a tariff at Deutsche Telekom or somewhere else, you need to identify with your ID. With your ID. So we're knowing a lot about the tariff. What we're also knowing a lot about is the SIM card information. So we're knowing where the SIM card is moving, if a SIM card is connected or not, and a SIM card is swapping, and the complete status of the SIM card. And what we're also knowing is everything about our network. So we're knowing where congestion is, we're knowing where maybe not the network is not so good, and all of this. And then we decided to take these capabilities and try to open this for developers. So on the one side, we're giving out information, so like, let me call it like read information, so developers can ask us maybe for a status and getting back in information, or we want developers to interact directly with the network to set parameters in our network. So I will go a little bit on 3 different fields now and say a little bit about this. So if you're thinking about developers directly interacting with the telco network, we're having 4 different, let me call it, pillars. So first of all, we're having all this quality on demand. So we're having we from network, we're knowing where the best route, where the best or the fastest route in our network is. So example, we're having like an AWS Edge instance in Frankfurt and the other one in Munich. And the consumer is sitting in Berlin. So which is the closest one? Maybe not the distance one is the closest, the fastest one, let me call it like this. Maybe Munich is faster than the one in Frankfurt. So we can give information about the current situation in our backbone, for example. But what we also can do is we can provide it's called quality on demand. So we can lift up the quality of interaction in the network. For example, let's go to the white icon. It's quality on demand in a mobile network. So one of my favorite examples is like if I'm going to a festival and there's somebody selling beer, most of the time they're just taking cash, because the network is so full, because thousands of people are standing in one cell or just some cells, and you cannot pay with your card there. So, and what we can do is to lift up these small transactions from the device to a higher quality level so that we can send out the data. This is just one example. I have one slide, I will show some more. So what we also want to do is we have informations to check device. It's like a big class what we want to offer. We're having the connection status, so we can give out how the connectivity is right now for this device. The quality, we can make predictions maybe in the future. So there's from Fraunhofer Institute these QoS of prediction, and we can also try to give a little more predictions, so that somebody asked what is happening on 17th of June at Alexanderplatz at 5 o'clock in the evening. Can I make their video stream or not? And then want something for IoT, just wake up over the network. So one other example, what where a lot of requests from developers is location verification. So what we're knowing is, so I'm connected to cells somewhere around here, and if somebody asks now, is Noel near this place? We know, yes, he is here because I'm connected to the cell. So I can localize people without an active GPS. So this is a little bit more accurate. Even you can save battery for IoT devices because you don't need a GPS information. So for example, you have like water pumps placed somewhere and you just want a notification if the water pumps are moving out of a distance from 1 kilometer or going away, so that you see that they get stolen or are moved. So, and the last point, just to give an insight what network APIs are, is that we can do, with the customer data I mentioned, we can do some anonymized motion data, we call it. So we can say, maybe like this is a map of Cologne, we can see, I guess it's the Cologne Cathedral, that in a defined time stamp, there are so many people in this sector. And based on this information, companies can adjust their traffic. So for an example, if you're thinking about a use case for Meta, Instagram or something, if they're knowing that a lot of people are in this area, they can deliver their content in lower quality, so that's going through. So if they're just delivering like the full HD content, maybe it's not going through because so much people and there's maybe higher congestion. And or even for, if you're thinking about other companies like drones companies, automotive driving, where they need to make route planning, they can see, okay, normally in this area I can drive there and I have a good connectivity. So now we're coming to some of the problems, what we're facing, and I will try to explain how we try to solve this. This is like a standardization of 3GPP, NEF feature for 5G standalone core to set up a higher quality in the network. So we take this API, we went to developers and asked them if they understand anything of this. The feedback was they don't understand anything. So the focus what we're having is not developers out of the telco industry. We really talking to developers which maybe no telco background, so they don't understand anything of the telco industry, and we want to enable them to directly interact with us. So based on this, we did together with Suprom some analytics and come up with our first concept to set in higher quality. So it's really simple, putting in application address, user address, a protocol, and decide maybe for quality of service level they want. And based on this API, we built up some test beds, one in Berlin, Winterfeldstraße, similar to the i14y lab, same building, same area. One in T-Mobile Poland with the Ericsson core, and one in Seattle with the Nokia core with our colleagues from T-Mobile US. And in these testbeds, we invited a lot of customers. So we take our APIs, inviting all of the, I guess, around 40, 50 different companies with developers to test the APIs if they can really use them. And based on this, we have some really nice use cases which are coming out. So we invited from startups to hyperscalers, bigger companies, so everything was in. So we showed on this year MWC like a remote maintenance use case together with Siemens Energy and Microsoft. Microsoft was part in here with their Teams and Azure instance. So Microsoft is building a product based on these APIs where they're getting our capabilities to bring them into Azure. So Teams is calling a higher quality for a remote maintenance situation. So like the remote worker getting a better quality in their glasses because they're getting more bandwidth, and the expert can see what he maybe not see before because it's not clear. The other use case was, we showed last year on MWC, it's automated valet parking, where a CAMARA system is manipulating a car into a parking lot. So yes, in this picture it's a really new car, but if you're thinking about cars which just having this parking button, I guess some of you know this is an older feature, it's not like a really new one, but all of the cars can be manipulated by a camera system and don't need their own sensors. So a camera system is saying the car, move left, move right, 1 second, 10 miles per hour in front, and then go on the left. And for this communication from the car to the server, we're using this quality on demand. So if, for example, 20 Pokemon Go players come around, that the car is still driving and not stopping all the time. So these are our bigger tests, and then we had a lot of different tests where we tested drones, where we tested game use cases, augmented reality, and all of these in the Winterfeldstraße. So based on this, we're getting a lot of experience, a lot of information, so that we can optimize the APIs, so that we are really sure that we're going to developers, maybe currently finishing their university, and they see the API and they're exactly knowing what they want to do. So then we're coming to another problem we had identified. If we're talking to, maybe an example, Google, or let's talk about Android, and we ask them, hey, we're from Deutsche Telekom, we want that you implement our APIs in your system so that our customers can ask for higher quality of information. The answer was, you are too small. So even with our whole footprint, we are too small for big companies to implement our APIs into their systems. So, and even because, then maybe just 10% of their consumers can use it. And we decided then to found an open source alliance. Under the Linux Foundation is DSMA, it's called CAMARA. As you can see, there are a lot of different players, and so a lot of telcos, of course. We're having all the hyperscalers in with their cloud solutions like Microsoft Azure, Google Cloud. We're having a lot of the vendors in, I guess, all of them. And so it's like a really big standardization, and what we're doing there is really to standardize the API calls. So like really the technical sentence we standardize there. And this is like one of the biggest point, because then a company can call so for example, BMW, if they're driving over to the French border and to the Orange network, they can set up the same API call to get the information. So it's just one implementation. If we're now taking a look more on a B2B2C use case, where I have an end customer behind this. So for example, Sparkasse or something like this, where you're not knowing which SIM card the end consumer have. It's make really sense to have the same API standardization behind this. So, but this is just the technical part. So there are different working groups. It's open source, so everybody can join. So if somebody's not in there or don't take a look in there, it's it's really open. And based on this, there was another initiative. So they take out the technical part and now putting over this open gateway. Maybe somebody of you, it was mentioned in the first presentation today also, and there's the goal to bring the APIs really into the telcos. As you can see, there are a lot of different players. I guess it's maybe all the telco networks, so that the complete globe is covered. Not all telcos network, but a good coverage for the whole world. And the focus is here really to bring the APIs into the network, to work on East-West federations, to really have something like an API roaming contracts and stuff like this, and even going really to aggregators and maybe even build an own gateway. What is meant by a gateway is more like maybe some of you knowing this tier 1, tier 2 principle from IP transit or interconnections, so that if a company is coming to Deutsche Telekom and asking, hey, I need this API, can you give me also the one for Vodafone, Telefonica, that we're having like really this roaming agreement there that we can give out all the informations. So, and so one more point to this. So it's the way Open Gateway is even that we trying to work on some critical parts. If we're talking about location services and so on, there are parts like consent. So if somebody wants to track me, I need to give a consent. And this is also part of this initiative to have a consent exchange between telcos. So if I'm now in Spain with my Deutsche Telekom SIM card and somebody wants to track me there, the Telefonica needs to ask Deutsche Telekom if it's okay, because my SIM card is based in, so I'm belonging to Deutsche Telekom still. So if we know, like I mentioned, we are not alone from Deutsche Telekom, so this is like a big initiative. This year on MWC we saw around 3,000 pieces of media coverage, 18 operators showing the network APIs and their boosters. So it's like all the big analysts writing about it, talking about it. So it's like a real push there, and we will expect the first APIs on the market in this year. So with joint movement. So if I now take a look a little bit on the how to address the market. So there are different ways. One of them is every telco can have their own marketplace. So a developer needs to go to each telco to sign up. Hey, Telefonica, I need your APIs. Hey, Deutsche Telekom, I need your APIs. So, but in the end, this is meaning that even if the APIs are standardized, you have a lot of different endpoints where you need to maybe manage. We have different contracts and all of this. So for this, the Open Gateway can help with standardization even in this direction. And but there's also like a big market behind. It's the aggregation. So you can see a lot of these big players here, like API players like Vonage, Infobip, Twilio. Nokia is placing there with a product, and what they currently doing is connecting to all the telcos, bringing in the APIs, building their own products on top of it. So like quality from Vonage, higher quality, and the developer can ask this quality, and the Vonage is doing more like the aggregation behind this, so deciding which network the consumer in the end is. So Vonage, of course, but all the other players like Google, Microsoft Azure, and AWS also pushing this so that you can get the APIs directly in your cloud instance. And this is also a big point we saw when we're talking to developers. Like I mentioned, like also mentioned in the panel before, we need to offer the developers something that they want to move over. If we're just offering our APIs there, just call it one API in our marketplace, quality on demand, why should a developer move over to us to use this API? So it needs to be like the best product in the world that they move over. But if we're going to the places where the developers are, like into their cloud instances, they're getting directly interaction with the same language they understand, the same SDK is, so they directly can use it and don't need to move out of their fields. So this year on MWC also Microsoft showed their program, it's called Programmable Telco. So they have an own product there exactly for these APIs to bring it into Microsoft Azure. So for an example, based on the Siemens use case I showed, it's really simple. So Siemens Energy is the consumer, where the expert is sitting on the right. We're having the Microsoft Azure instance in the middle. And then this Microsoft Azure instance is calling our API. So the Siemens Energy software, in this case Teams, so it's also for Microsoft, is calling the API over Microsoft Azure. If you're thinking about now a customer relationship, our customer is Microsoft with the aggregation, and Microsoft is holding the customer Siemens behind this. And in the end, the end-to-end flow is then that the Siemens Energy remote worker getting a higher quality. So, and I guess I'm done. And so this was the last point. On the right side, I don't know if somebody is a developer, we're having like a developer community also, so for this test beds and all of this.
All right. Thank you, Noel. Okay, so as explained earlier, so we have now time for Q&A from the audience. And Mikko, you're already with the mic. So who wants to raise the hand for the first question? Henry, come on, I see you. Okay, first one.
Hey, thanks a lot for the presentation. Really a lot of insights and glad that you mentioned open source. That was sadly, it was not mentioned in the talk before. And the problem that I see in this is that the definition of who are the developers, this is like a short question. And based on that, I see that looks like they're startups, but can you define them properly? Terminology for that, because like this was not defined in the previous talk as well. Who are you addressing with this? What is the characteristics of these developers that you're looking for? And based on that, how you attract them in the way that you share enough data? I think this is a huge problem, but how do you attract them in a way that you share enough data, enough use cases that you know the value proposition for you and for them is like a win-win?
So to address the first question, we're really focusing on the application developers. So on the people who are developing the applications for consumers or for B2B use cases. So this, if we're thinking about this is my customer in the end, so he will see my product. And this is exactly where we also see like the implementation then. So in different applications, really maybe in gaming applications on your smartphone, maybe in Teams communication applications, in Zoom, and all of these. So the focus group is external developers which are not in telco cosmos, which are really sitting and building maybe front-end applications for end consumers. And yeah, we had a lot of startups there, but yeah, like I mentioned, the focus group is nearly everything. So we clustering always in different. So when we started with this for concept, we clustered in different categories. So we have something like, it's called augmented reality, where streaming in, so like high bandwidth use cases, and then we go and search for companies for this. So some startups, some bigger companies like Siemens for their augmented reality use case, and all the APIs are so sliced that they, in the best way, can use by each use case, so that they're not focused on one company. So, yeah.
All right. Second question. Nico over there.
I have questions about the APIs or types of APIs. I can imagine that you have APIs for network services, possibly for management service or orchestration service when we go in the telecommunication area, what I expect firstly. And also what you mentioned to general services. What is the time plan, or what is the intention there? How is the approach to go there?
So there are 3 APIs, which is really a big push on. This is quality on demand, so getting higher quality. There's an API, it's called check device with the roaming status, to get out the roaming status of a network, and this location verification. So just verification, not giving out the exact standpoint. And all of these 3 APIs are just implemented, I guess, in around 6 networks. And all of the companies are currently working on the BSS integration. So the products are there, but the BSS integration is still missing, the marketplaces. So yeah, a lot of companies of telcos did something like API marketplaces 10 years before, but they now need to refactor it and bring this out. So I'm really sure these 3 APIs we will see somehow this year on the market in some networks. So focusing on October, December, I guessing there will come something.
My next question is, I heard that there will also be some relationship to other groups, SDOs, for example, 3GPP working groups. Is there any more detailed information about that?
So there's another big initiative. It's from TMF Forum. There's a Catalyst project, and it's really based so that the CAMARA APIs are really the northbound APIs to the end consumer. But if you're thinking about now how we can bring it into the networks, then we can really build these processes, everything with this TMM Forum APIs. And then if we go a little bit deeper, there's CAMARA. So like this quality of service API I showed before, this is something that we doing in the network. So we really taking the APIs which are there and building like a service API layer for the developers on top of it. So we're not trying to build everything new. We're trying to work on the standards in the telco industry, but if you're going to the consumer, we're building a new instance on top so they can understand it. And so for us, it's also like a security layer, so that we really decide what information we want to give out to the developers if you're thinking about privacy informations or like all of this. So maybe not the big 3GPP APIs, and we reduce them in to give them out.
Thank you.
Time for the last question. We are running a little bit out of time, but we see. Henry over there. Okay.
First of all, thank you for the great presentation. But my question is about your experience and your surroundings experience about actually, in my opinion, the biggest enabler in the cloud world regarding consumption-based business model on APIs, which is the IAM, Identity and Access Management. How do you see that the industry would be able to move away from subscription-based model into the more consumption-based model, and how would that be linked to the end user's credit card?
Yeah, so this point is really like, we really need to find APIs which are called often. So hopefully that we earn the money. If you're thinking about the whole process, is we need to give developers like APIs they want to call. They maybe can build like also mentioned in the panel before, new innovations on top of it, which they can directly sell to their customers. So in the end, hopefully they finding like the best new innovation products based on our APIs to their end consumers, earning a lot of money with it, and we're getting revenue out of this because they're calling our APIs. So we really need to find the best for the end consumer, and then hoping that we found out, a good way there.
All right. Thank you. Thank you so much, Noel.